Senator Mark Warner. He's a Democrat from the battleground state of Virginia. He's a prominent Hillary Clinton supporter. Senator, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Wolf.
As you know, Hillary Clinton, she delivered this truly scathing speech against Donald Trump today. This was her second speech. We've seen her take direct aim at him step by step on his policies, the first time on national security, now on his economic policies. Should we expect to see more of these kinds of attack speeches by Hillary Clinton?
Well, I hope so, because there's a lot of ammunition. I actually have been in business longer than I've been in politics. I've built a series of businesses, and to think that Mr. Trump is trying to lay out this proposition that he's a successful business guy. He's failed miserably, bankrupt 4 separate businesses. He has a constant record of slow pay to small vendors who support some of his real estate deals. The fact that he's gone out, and I've been obsessed about our nation's balance sheet issues, and he is the only national political figure that said he would try to renegotiate our national debt, which basically means put the full faith and credit of America in jeopardy. Nobody at a national level in politics would have that, even think about making that kind of statement, but he's made it. So there's a lot of ammunition here to point out that this guy does not have a record in business that has been responsible, and sure as heck doesn't have any understanding overall macro budget picture, and quite honestly, he has no real proposal about how you jumpstart the economy in terms of innovation, in terms of infrastructure.
But Senator, you know, whether or not he had some divisions or whatever that failed, some companies that failed, by all accounts, he's a billionaire. Whether he's worth $10 billion or $5 billion or $2 billion, he's a billionaire, so he must be pretty successful as a businessman.
Let's face it, we don't know that because we've never seen his tax returns. You know, again, tell me a presumptive nominee that's not laid out his tax returns. We don't know how much he's really worth. What we do know, he's left a amount of wreckage of failed businesses behind him, and he's got a reputation that says this is not somebody you do business with. And he makes these provocative statements that might work as a real estate guy, but does not work as the leader of the greatest nation in the world and the free world.
So when he filed that net worth statement with the Federal Election Commission stating that he was worth $10 billion, you don't buy that?
Let's put it like this. I'd buy a lot more if we actually got a chance to look at his tax returns.
But I want to move on, but are you questioning whether or not he's a billionaire?
Listen, I think how much Donald Trump is actually worth or not worth, how much his actual liabilities are, we don't know. I don't have the foggiest notion.
Why is Hillary Clinton behind him on the question who would be better in dealing with the economy? He gets 51% according to our new poll. She gets 43%. He does better. And if it's the economy stupid, that could potentially carry him over the top.
Well, I think there is a presumption that as a business guy, he must have done well. There was very few of the former Republican opponents he had, many of them who I now wish they would have had that chance to point out that he had frankly, a very checkered business background. And on top of that, when you look at when he does, weigh in on proposals, he's talking about a tax and spend plan that would add $4 trillion to the national debt. He's got no specific plan about infrastructure. He's got no plan in terms of innovation and startup industries where, frankly, about 70 to 80% of all net new jobs are coming from. He's got a series of one-liners that may have played well for a certain segment of the Republican electorate, but I don't think is playing well as his record gets more exposed. And quite honestly, most business folks, I've got broad base of business support. I know very few business people, Democrat or Republican, that are actually supporting him.
He and his supporters point out that he's created thousands of jobs over the years, that Hillary Clinton hasn't created any jobs, to which you reply.
What I reply is he's left 4 businesses in deep bankruptcy. How many of those jobs actually ever ended up being a full-time entity as opposed to a flash in the pan? Look at the so-called famous Trump University. He may have hired some folks for that, but the records show that most of the people who attended that university felt that it was a ripoff, and the only guy that made money was Donald Trump.
CNN is reporting, as you know, that Hillary Clinton has narrowed her short list for vice president. On the list, one of the names, a fellow Virginia Senator Tim Kaine. Do you think he should be Hillary Clinton's vice presidential running mate?
If Secretary Clinton asked me, I would absolutely recommend Tim Kaine. I've known him for 35 years. We knew each other at law school. He was my lieutenant governor when I was governor. There's nobody that's more honest, straightforward, trusting, and somebody that actually brings, I think, both the experience as a governor, as a chief executive, that I think would supplement her skills.
Is he the leading contender based on what you're hearing?
Listen, I'm not going to make that kind of presumptive. I know all the folks who she's considering. I think she's got a great selection of choice. But I, for one, hope that she picks Tim Kaine.
As you know, Senator Warner, your name has frequently been mentioned at the same time. Would you be open to being the Vice President of the United States?
Wolf, what I'm open to is being here in the United States Senate, hopefully being able to put together the kind of bipartisan coalitions to get some things done. I mean, one of the things that is actually, I think, has helped Trump a little bit has been the fact that, let's face it, in Congress, we've not been able to forge the kind of bipartisan coalitions in terms of debt and deficit, in terms of infrastructure that we need. I think I've got a pretty good bipartisan reputation up here, and I think that's where I can be the best value.
So you're not open to, if she were to tap you and say, let's think about it, would you be open to that?
Well, I'm not being vetted, nor do I expect to be, but I hope Tim Kaine is.
All right. You're a good friend of Tim Kaine. We'll see what happens on that front. We have more questions, Senator. Stand by. We'll continue our conversation. Virginia Senator Mark Warner, he's a key member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. We're following, Senator, some breaking news in the Orlando terror investigation. I know you're up to speed on that. Our Justice correspondent, Evan Perez, now reporting that the actions of Omar Mateen, the killer, the night of the Pulse nightclub shooting, are mysterious. We're learning that when he left his house, he was carrying a bag of guns. Then he visited the club earlier in the night. He left, he returned, and then he carried out that mass murder. Is there any new indication you're getting that this attack was directed, that he had help, or does it still look like this was some sort of lone wolf attack?
Well, it's an ongoing investigation, Wolf, and we were briefed today. I'm not going to go into any of those details. But there are clearly questions. We've seen the 9/11 call put out into the public. He may have been self-radicalized, but if he was self-radicalized, he was fairly confused, since he was both claiming allegiance to ISIL and al-Nusra, which is a group that hates ISIL. He made comments about Hezbollah, which is a Shia group, versus ISIL, which is Sunni. So I think there's still more investigation to be done to see both what was the motivation and whether there was any particular reason why this particular club got targeted. Clearly, it was a hate crime. Whether it was a hate crime just against America writ large or against the GLBT community in particular, time will tell. But I trust the FBI to get to the bottom of this.
What about the wife?
I think there is still a lot of questions I have, and that the investigation has about that wife.
So they're going to continue that investigation. Let's talk about guns in America for a moment. A lot of conversation in the aftermath of the Orlando mass murder. Your colleague, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, he's getting some criticism for remarks he made to the Washington Post about the failed gun votes in the Senate yesterday. He said, and I'm quoting him now, "We've got to make this clear, constant case that Republicans have decided to sell weapons to ISIS." Do you agree with Senator Murphy, or did he go too far?
What I would say is, after the tragedy in Orlando, which we now see these tragedies not once a year but every few months, when we have 30,000 gun deaths a year, I think Americans, I hear this from Virginians, they don't want to hear their elected officials say we offer thoughts and prayers to the victims. They want us to do something. And quite honestly, it was and still remains a supporter of the Second Amendment, but I think there are reasonable things we can do. We can say that if you're on one of these terror watch lists, you shouldn't be able to purchase a firearm. When you say that, if we're going to make sure that we have closed the gun show loophole so that if you buy a gun at a gun show, you go through the same background check that you go through at a gun shop, that is overwhelmingly supported. And I do think that there are a number of folks in the Congress who say, you know, they want to do everything they can to stand up against terrorists. Well, when you've got every law enforcement organization in America say, let's close this terrorist loophole, I think that would be smart policy, and I was very disappointed that the Senate didn't act yesterday.
So did Senator Murphy, though, go too far when he said Republicans have decided to sell weapons to ISIS?
Listen, I think that Chris Murphy, who's been a leader on this issue, was the person who got up and said kind of he's not going to just go through this again without bringing the Senate to a halt with I think the filibuster, which I was proud to participate in. You'll have to ask Chris that, but I understand the notion that you can't continue to say that you want to fight terrorists and not be willing to then do what law enforcement has said, which is say, let's make sure that if you're on one of these terrorist watch lists, you don't purchase a firearm.
We're out
to
of
me,
time,
that's a logical connection.
Do you agree with his sentiment?
Listen, what I agree with is the Senate ought to act on this. I'm anxious to see this bipartisan effort that wouldn't go as far as yesterday, but if we can get something moving forward, that would be a step in the right direction.
Senator Warner, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Just